The police used a strand of hair to clone a killer pervert, but the clone turned out to be stronger than the original. A battered woman calls the police, pleading for help as a serial killer known as the Torch breaks into her home. He allows her to call the police and give her address before killing her with a single blow to the head. Showing a twisted sense of care, he sets her body on fire to protect her son. Detective Jack Riley arrives at the scene with his team. Realizing there's no time to wait for backup, he rushes into the burning apartment after hearing a child's cry. As the fire intensifies, a beam collapses, blocking the exit. Jack finds an alternative escape route through a window, climbing down a construction ladder while spotting the killer. Handing the boy to his colleagues, he chases after the murderer. During the pursuit, Jack deduces that the Torch is hidden on a bus. He rushes to block its path and checks all passengers. Spotting the suspect, he asks the driver for help, but the killer uses the passengers as human shields, escaping through a window and killing several people, including the driver. Jack opens fire, but the only injury the killer sustains is a cut from broken glass. Eventually, Edward hides in a car and tries to run Jack over. When Jack doesn't rise, the killer backs up to crush him, but Jack rolls aside just in time, suffering only a leg injury. After the incident, national security agents offer assistance, but Jack declines and angrily calls the killer a pathetic coward in the press, bruising the man's ego. Soon after, Jack retires and throws a family celebration for his new boat repair business. The carefree life is abruptly interrupted by a call from the killer, who taunts Jack. Despite Jack's pleas to be left alone, Edward provokes him, calling him a talentless failure and promising to continue his gruesome crimes, knowing no one can catch him. Unsettled even in retirement and determined to bring the killer to justice, Jack meets with Stan and heads to a secret lab outside the city. With fingerprints, blood samples, and other data, national security agents feed the information into a supercomputer, gathering details about the suspected killer. The government oversees the creation of a clone using a hair found at a crime scene a year ago, containing the killer's genetic blueprint. The program aims to combat terrorism by creating duplicates to track the original person. Before presenting the program to higher authorities, they test it on the serial killer, believing it to be a good practice run. As Edward's arch-nemesis, Jack is assigned as the clone's guardian to help him develop and track the killer. The press is barred from learning about the project due to its secrecy, but Jack is ready for the tough challenge. At some point, something goes wrong with the clone, and it is forcibly removed from its capsule. Edward seems to sense this disturbance, freezing in place momentarily. A bit later, the replicant wakes up in an isolated cell and sees a monitor with a woman teaching him basic skills. Before attempting to catch the killer, his clone needs to learn to walk, sit, and speak. Watching the clone's actions, Jack assumes he is mentally retarded, but the scientists ask for more time, explaining that a genetically created human can quickly adapt to external factors and their impact. Stan admits the clone isn't perfect, but they use the genome to enhance telepathic abilities, linking the minds of the clone and the killer. Soon, Jack and the clone have their first in-person contact. The former detective, filled with hatred, looks at the face of the criminal and doesn't distinguish between the clone and the killer. He doesn't give the clone food right away, provoking aggression. Within a few days, the clone starts making progress, easily performing acrobatic tricks and demonstrating strength, persistence, and endurance. Jack remains skeptical, fearing the clone could become a follower of the killer, but Stan promises to eliminate him at the end of the experiment. Later, Jack decides to visit the clone and bring food to his room for the first time. Afraid of unexpected actions from the clone, the former detective offers him handcuffs and shackles him to a metal table. Not yet able to speak or understand what's happening, the clone becomes nervous. Displaying enormous strength, he rips out the metal table, but Jack uses a taser against him, forcing the clone to obey his commands. Fearful of violence and physical pain, the clone becomes increasingly obedient and follows orders perfectly. Once the preliminary training is complete, Jack takes the clone, like a dog on a leash. The clone is scared of the sun, so the former detective requests sunglasses for him. Learning that the agent's sunglasses cost $600, Jack decides to keep them for himself and gives the clone his cheap ones instead. Promising to report on the experiment's progress every 12 hours, Jack and the clone return to the city. Minutes after arriving, the former detective notices they're being followed and loses the pursuers at a nearby traffic light. At an abandoned factory, Jack tries to speed up the process of establishing a telepathic link with the killer. He hits the clone and threatens him with a gun, then offers him a weapon, giving him a chance to shoot him and escape. Agents tracking Jack surround them and order the clone to surrender. The clone fears them as much as they fear him, so Jack suggests everyone calm down and lower their weapons. Disillusioned with the experiment, Jack believes the replicant is useless and allows them to take him back to the base. The clone is reluctant to return to his cage, so he defends himself and resists capture. Showing a desire for freedom, he not only escapes but also begins to defend himself and then attacks the agents. Watching this, Jack realizes there's potential in catching the killer and decides to keep the clone. After this, they head to a private house where a year ago the killer committed a crime, taking the lives of 2 people. The clone is still a bit slow and is learning to communicate with people, creating some difficulties, but Jack manages to resolve them. It's important for Jack that the clone is at the crime scene and possibly remembers something. At first, he behaves detached, but then recalls some details of the crime that occurred there a year ago. Noticing this, Jack takes him to the bathroom on the 2nd floor where everything happened. Reliving the traumatic memories, the clone sees how the killer beat and executed a woman, then set the fire and escaped through the basement. Meanwhile, Edward notices another negligent mother yelling at her son and decides to make her his next victim. Later, Jack arrives at the home of his former partner and shackles the clone to a pipe in the basement to prevent him from running away or doing anything illegal. Jack wants to check the clone's face against the police database, but Angie thinks it violates rules and procedures. The clone tries dog food, but Angie's son sees this and decides to feed the chained man. At one point, a child's scream frightens Jack and the boy's mother. Seeing blood on the child's face, the former detective brutally beats the clone, assuming he did something wrong. Angie learns from her son that the man did nothing wrong. It was the dog that pushed the boy, causing him to split his lip. In the evening, Stan and the agents easily locate Jack and remind him that he must follow the rules and report on the experiment's progress. The former detective is ready to give up the venture, but the national security agents know about the conflict and personal animosity between Jack and the Torch. Realizing he has no choice, Jack keeps the clone but doesn't forget to express his displeasure towards Stan. Returning home, the detective undresses the clone in an attempt to find a listening device, but the mother walks into the bathroom at the wrong moment and misunderstands the situation. The woman believes people become criminals if treated accordingly. Realizing she's right, Jack shows compassion towards the clone, giving him a jacket and a blanket. At night, the replicant sees Edward's memories and understands that he became a killer because he suffered from his mother's abuse in childhood. The next morning, the criminal attacks the negligent single mother and tries to strangle her. Bystanders decide to help and protect the woman but lose in the uneven fight. Taking advantage of the moment, the single mother tries to escape through a nearby restaurant's kitchen, but Edward beats the cooks and leaves a warning mark on her face. Meanwhile, Jack and Angie take photos of the clone to check his face in the police database. Seizing the opportunity, the detective shows him pictures of the victims, hoping it will help him remember everything. Thanks to the facial check, Jack manages to find the killer, learning that his name is Edward Garrett. Quickly leaving the police station, the former detective heads to the last known address listed in Edward's file. The station chief suspects that Jack has some plan and sends a few more officers after him, including Angie. Breaking into the suspected criminal's apartment, the police confirm they've found his hideout. On the computer screen, Jack discovers photos of the victims and starts reviewing them, trying to find the next clue. At that moment, the clone begins to panic and does everything to break free. Ripping off the handrail with the handcuffs, he rushes upstairs and warns about a bomb in the printer. In the last moment, the police manage to leave the apartment, but a powerful explosion occurs, severely injuring one of the officers. Knowing that Edward is nearby, the clone rushes outside. They spot each other, but the Torch tries to escape. The clone finds him in a closed restaurant and gets punched in the face. The killer easily overpowers his pathetic copy, then wrecks the place, forbidding the bartender from calling the police. Edward tries to figure out who the clone is and what he wants, but the bartender interrupts their conversation again. The killer executes the restaurant worker, leaving the clone alive only to understand their connection. Angie and Jack learn about the incident and hurry to the scene, but the Torch manages to flee. He then calls the former detective to get more details about the clone, but Jack politely refuses. The clone, experiencing being among people for the first time, is confused about what to do and where to go. Jack can't find him, so he tricks Stan to learn the clone's location. Meanwhile, the clone encounters an easygoing girl who invites him to her place. She is ready to satisfy all his desires but asks for a $100 prepayment. The clone has no money but wants to kiss her and prematurely experiences pleasure. The girl calls her pimp and informs him about the simpleton who didn't pay for her time. Realizing he was a virgin, she is willing to let him go, but it's too late. The pimp and his henchmen try to beat the clone, but they lose badly in the fight and run away. The police and Jack arrive at the scene and take the clone to the station, disappointing the girl who is ready to meet the inexperienced client again. Reliving the killer's painful memories, the clone starts asking more questions to understand who he is and why he was created. Realizing his mission, he tries to help find the criminal, but it's challenging due to the numerous victims appearing in his memories. Gradually, the clone earns Jack's trust, leading him to remove the handcuffs and allow the clone to ride in the front passenger seat. Soon, the former detective shows him a photo of a presumed victim of the serial killer. Delving into the mind and memories of the killer, his genetic twin gives the first clues that help locate the girl. They manage to find the right hotel and room, but Jack and the clone arrive a little too late, finding only the charred body of yet another single mother. Realizing that the crime was committed recently and that Edward is nearby, they head to the basement because the clone knows exactly where the killer is hiding. At some point, the twin locks Jack in a separate room to continue the pursuit alone. The Torch meets his copy and learns details about his creation, then claims that they are brothers who could work together. Jack tries to shoot the criminal, but the clone stops him, influenced by the killer. As a result of the incident, Jack gives another scandalous interview to journalists, hurting the killer's pride. In the evening, he calls the former cop and hints that he is watching him. Promising to eliminate him later, the killer heads to the hospital to visit his sick mother. He tells her about each victim in detail so she can suffer, knowing her son became a killer because of her cruelty. Realizing he is tired of her and no longer wants to look into her eyes, the killer ends his own mother's life. The clone has another nightmare related to the criminal's memories and learns his real name, which he changed when moving to the US. This allows Jack and Angie to learn the killer's entire biography. It turns out his mother not only abused him, regularly beating him, but also executed her own husband. Trying to destroy the evidence, she locked her son in a closet and set the house on fire. But rain saved the boy, resulting in his survival but leaving him with severe psychological trauma that turned him into a killer. Knowing that Edward's mother is still alive and in a hospice, Jack and the twin head there, but it's too late. They find the old woman's corpse, and the clone asks for a moment to say goodbye to the woman who seems unfamiliar to him. At the same time, the killer bursts into the morgue, threatens the nurse, and orders Jack to drop his weapon. After hitting the girl on the head, Edward attacks the former cop and beats him mercilessly. Turning to his clone, the killer offers to finish what they started and execute the policeman. The replicant refuses and throws the knife to the floor, unwilling to take the life of someone who became a friend. Edward decides to kill them both, assuming the police will take the clone for the criminal. Seizing the moment, the genetic twin provokes the Torch into a conflict, distracting him so Jack can attack from behind. The clone tries to take the gun, but the criminal stabs him with scissors, then deals with the former cop and escapes. Beating everyone in his path, Edward goes down to the parking lot and steals an ambulance. Despite his age, Jack pursues and easily catches up to the vehicle, then tries to get inside. During the fight, he manages to wrap the seatbelt around the killer's neck, causing the ambulance to crash. Edward escapes, but Jack pursues him until he gets hit in the face with a shovel and loses consciousness. Upon waking, the detective realizes that the Torch is about to throw him into a crematorium furnace and turn him to ashes, but he's too weak to resist. At the last moment, the clone appears in the room, saves Jack, and engages in a fight with the criminal. Having learned not only to see his memories but also to read his thoughts in real time, the twin anticipates Edward's every move and defeats him in a fair fight. Understanding that he cannot commit a crime, the clone decides not to strangle the killer and leaves him alive. The Torch takes advantage and hits him on the back of the head with a shovel, after which Jack eliminates the criminal once and for all. Equipment damage during the fight sparks, starting a strong fire. The fire affects the gas tank, predicting a powerful explosion. Realizing this, Jack tries to help the injured twin escape quickly, but he refuses. Pushing the detective out the door, the clone closes it and stays inside, and a powerful explosion follows. National security agents are disappointed that their project failed, but Jack cannot help them. Some time later, during the rain, the policeman notices a mailman leaving a package in his mailbox. Deciding to check the contents with Angie's son, he finds the killer's music box and realizes that the clone managed to survive the explosion by hiding in a morgue freezer. Having gotten rid of agents and scientists who could use him in experiments, the twin starts a free life with the beautiful woman who had been waiting for him all this time. Would you like to have a clone of yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.